What is going on, everyone? James Lynch here. This is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we got a great one. Jon Jones, the return fight, UFC 285, T-Mobile Arena, going to be taking on Ciryl Gane for the vacant heavyweight title. But before I give you my preview and pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Those three things really do help out this channel a lot, and I'd appreciate it. That would be great. Okay, let's get into this fight. Really excited for this one. If you never watched the show before, I basically preview a big fight, and I go through a bunch of stats, a bunch of intangibles, and then at the end, I give you my pick, and some of the stuff may have relevance to the fight, it may not, but I go through a bit of everything here in the breakdown. Okay, as you can see there, quick tail of the tape. This is going to be for the vacant heavyweight championship, so it's 5 rounds. Of course, Francis Ngannou, the former champ, leaving the UFC as a free agent. So these two are going to be duking it out here. Quick tail of the tape, like I said, you can see a 26-1 record for Jon Jones, 11-1 for Gane. They're about -110, but I'll show you some of the odds here a little bit later here. 35 years old to 32, 6'4" apiece, 84.5 inch reach compared to 81. So Jones going to be a little bit more of a reach advantage in this fight, but they're exactly the same height, which is very interesting for this matchup. And like I mentioned, this will be headlining the UFC 284 pay-per-view at the T-Mobile Arena, so bigger cage. Let's get into Jon Jones. Been a while. We've not seen Jon in a bit. So I mentioned it there, 26-1 record with 1 no contest. He's got 10 knockouts, 6 submissions, and 10 decisions. He is not ranked because he hasn't fought in a couple of years. So Jon will be moving up to the heavyweight division for the first time in his UFC career. Jon is 35 years old. He is 6'4" with an 84.5 inch reach. So he'll have a 3.5 inch reach advantage in this fight. He's the former UFC light heavyweight champion. Of course, he vacated the title. Trains right now at Fight Ready, previously at Jackson Wink, now out in Arizona with Henry Cejudo and that camp over there. So that's a bit of a switch up. And Jon is a BJJ purple belt going in here. He's got a ton of accolades. I'm not going to go through all of them. Otherwise, we'd spend half the breakdown doing that. But he's had 11 successful title defenses as a light heavyweight champion. He has the longest light heavyweight champion reign in UFC history at 1,501 days. He's got the longest unbeaten streak in UFC history at 18. He's tied for most successful title defenses in UFC history at 11 with Demetrius Johnson. He's got most wins in UFC title fights at 14. He's got the longest total fight time in light heavyweight division history at 5 hours and 40 minutes. He has the most significant strikes landed in UFC light heavyweight division history at 1,463. And he also has the most strikes landed in UFC light heavyweight division history at 800 and 1,835 there. Just making sure I'm reading that right. He's also got the highest takedown percentage in UFC light heavyweight division history at a 95% takedown defense, which is amazing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. He's also the youngest fighter to win a UFC title at 23 years old and 242 days. He's got Fight of the Night honors 4 times against Quentin Rampage Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Alexander Gustafsson, and Daniel Cormier. He's got knockout of the night 1 time against Brandon Vera. He's got submission of the night 2 times against Ryan Bader and Vitor Belfort. And he's got performance of the night 1 time against Daniel Cormier. Jon Jones does not have any amateur experience. He went straight to the pros in April of 2008, made his UFC debut later that year. That's pretty crazy. I kind of forgot about that. He made his debut. So he debuted in April, made his debut in April. MMA professional debut, and then fought in the UFC just a few months later in August, which is nuts. One fight that I think some people may have forgot, he actually fought Parker Porter back in the day and defeated him in 36 seconds, UFC heavyweight, which is kind of interesting. Some notable wins. Jon has got a lot of good notable wins. That's one thing. When you look at Jones's resume, very impressive. Mauricio Shogun Rua, of course, who he won the title from. I was back at UFC 128. Also has wins over Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans. You could put Rampage Jackson in that category as well, even though Rampage, maybe had a few losses before that. He defeated Alexander Gustafsson twice. That's impressive. Glover Teixeira, who, we just saw last weekend lose an opportunity at winning the title again. Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, and Dominic Reyes are all notable opponents as well because they're all ranked. So those are good wins too. Just the one loss to Matt Hamill. It's not really a loss. It's one of those weird things. This should have just been a DQ. You can see there, illegal downward elbows. Jones gets the loss in his record in a fight that he was winning. He was like dominating Hamill. Hamill was covering up. And then he landed some illegal downward elbows, so that's a loss. So realistically, Jones should be undefeated. I did mention the no contest. That was against Daniel Cormier in their rematch at UFC 214. He did knock out Cormier, head kicks and punches, but of course, had an issue with USADA. So that's why that has turned into a no contest in that fight. So there we go. That's Jon Jones's very star-studded resume. Jones has had a lot of layoffs. If you look earlier in his career, Jones was very active. I mentioned there, making his pro debut, going straight to the UFC, and then fighting a couple times a year. He was a big chip for the UFC back in the day. Was fighting multiple times a year. And then fast forward to the Daniel Cormier fight, the second fight, I believe it was. No, it was the first fight. First fight against Cormier. He did not fight OSP until 2016. He had the Cormier fight in 2015. There was a 476-day layoff in that fight, which is nuts, in between the two fights. Then going from OSP to Cormier, the Cormier rematch, 462-day layoff. Then going from Cormier to Gustafsson, 518-day layoff. And then he's going to have the longest layoff in his UFC career, in his career period, going into this fight. So he fought Dominic Reyes in February of 2020. When he steps into the cage against Ciryl Gane, it will be exactly 1,120 days since he last fought. That is the longest layoff he's had in his career. Variety of reasons of that. There's some contract issues. Jones wanted to bulk up to heavyweight. There was stuff outside the cage. We're not here to talk about Jon Jones outside the cage here today because that's, the only thing that really matters is him missing time. And I feel like I kind of summarized that there as well. Jones has only had one injury in his career that took him out of a fight. I think people forgot he was supposed to fight Daniel Cormier at UFC 178. He had a torn meniscus in that fight, but overall been pretty healthy. His biggest challenge has been outside the cage with USADA, with all types of issues. And again, the only thing that really makes this relevant in this discussion here is just the fact that he's missed a lot of time. So that is Jon Jones in a nutshell. There's a couple close fights that Jon has had as well. Forgot to mention those. The first Alexander Gustafsson fight, UFC 165. Went back and looked at the media scorecards for that one. That was actually the first event I ever covered, first UFC event I ever covered in my life as a member of the media. I was cage side. I thought Jones won at the time. Went back and looked at the media scorecards for that one. 13 media members scoring the fight for Jon Jones, just one scoring it for Alexander Gustafsson, but a very close fight and a fight that definitely pushed Jon to the limit in that one. That was back in September of 2013. So that was 10 years ago. Well, close to 10 years ago, right? It's just crazy how much time has passed since then. The other two close fights that he's had were obviously Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes. Thiago Santos was a split decision win. Went and looked at the media scorecards for that. That was UFC 239, July 2019. 14 media members scored the fight for Jones, 4 scoring it for Thiago Santos in that fight. But the Dominic Reyes fight is the one that everyone talks about. UFC 247, Jones Reyes. That was in Texas, if you remember. A bit of weird judging in that one. 7 media members scoring the fight for Jones. 14 media members scoring the fight for Dominic Reyes. So again, Jones, if the judging is on point, maybe Jon Jones is coming off a loss into this fight. We never know, but he is still technically undefeated in his last couple fights. Well, I shouldn't say couple, a lot of fights leading up to Matt Hamill. But then if you think about it, then maybe Hamill and Reyes should switch places in the sense that, the Hamill fight should have been a no contest at the very least, or at least a win. Well, not at least a win. Should have just been a no contest or a DQ there. And it should have just been maybe a decision win there for Dominic Reyes. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is Jon Jones's record stands at 26-1 with 1 no contest. Okay, let's get to his opponent, Ciryl Gane, the former interim UFC heavyweight champion, Bon Gamin. Ciryl Gane, 11-1 record. You can see there. He's got 5 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 3 decisions. He's the number 1 ranked heavyweight in the UFC right now. He is 32 years old. He's 6'4" with an 81-inch reach. The only advantage that he has in this fight is that he's 3 years younger than Jon Jones. And Gane's going to be actually turning 33 in April. Just one thing to keep in mind there. Trains at MMA Factory. Like I mentioned, former UFC interim heavyweight champion. Title he won by defeating Derek Lewis. He's got performance of the night 2 times against Don'Tale Mayes and Derek Lewis. And he's got fight of the night 1 time against Tai Tuivasa. Ciryl Gane, much like Jon Jones, did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros in August of 2018. And just to give a little bit of context of the experience difference here, Jon Jones was so Ciryl Gane's professional MMA debut was August of 2018. In December of that same year, Jon Jones rematched Alexander Gustafsson. That was his 23rd career fight. So by the time Ciryl Gane was starting MMA, Jon Jones already had 23 fights. So one thing to kind of keep in mind there. And then Gane actually made his UFC debut shortly after that. This is why Gane's kind of the exception to the rule here in terms of what he's been able to accomplish. It's actually crazy. Makes his debut in 2018 and then is fighting in the UFC like a year later. It's crazy. He's fighting Pasola. Actually, it was almost a year to the day. It was the same month, actually. So he made his professional debut August 2018. He's in the UFC in August 2019. Pretty nutty if you think about that. That's crazy. So, and Jones had already had 25 fights at that point by the time Ciryl Gane made his UFC debut. So again, we know experience in the favor of Jon Jones. Ciryl Gane is 8-1 in the UFC. He's got 5 stoppage wins. He's got some notable wins here. Junior Dos Santos, I'd put that in that category, former champion. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, ranked opponent. Alexander Volkov, ranked opponent. And Derek Lewis, former title challenger and ranked opponent as well. And then obviously his last fight, Tai Tuivasa, getting it done in that fight in the 3rd round. Gane's only had 1 layoff compared to Jones, which makes sense because he doesn't have that many UFC fights. Going from Tanner Boser to Junior Dos Santos, there was a 357-day layoff. He did have, part of the reason was he was supposed to fight Shamil back in April of 2020, but he had, I'm not even going to bother pronouncing this, but it's basically like a lung issue. So that's what kept him out of that fight. But that's like sort of the only injury that Gane has ever had in his career. As far as close fights, the only close fight that you could say for Gane was maybe the Francis Ngannou fight back at UFC 270, which Ngannou won by decision. I went back and looked at the decision or the scorecards for that one. 22 media members scoring the fight for Francis Ngannou, just 1 scoring it for Ciryl Gane. So keep that in mind. Most people feeling like Ngannou did enough to get it done. Before I give you my pick here, I just want to mention a few things because I see a lot of people talking about Jon Jones's wrestling as being one of the reasons to pick him in this fight. And I went and looked here, and granted, Jon doesn't use his wrestling all the time, but if you look at his takedown accuracy, it's 44%, so less than 50%, but his takedown defense is 95%. So I don't think we'll see Ciryl Gane shooting for a takedown in this fight. Takedown defense at 95% is pretty incredible. So yeah, you can kind of look at all of the stats here with Jones. Very impressive. With what he's been able to do, as you can see in his record. Now, Ciryl Gane, if you look at it here, one of the big topics was the wrestling with Francis Ngannou in their fight. Went back and looked at it. Ngannou landed 4 takedowns in that fight. Why can't I find the actual fight itself? There we go. I think it's this one. And it was this fight. Yeah, here we go. So if you look at this fight, oops, that's Tai Tuivasa. Wrong fight. What am I looking for here? Francis Ngannou. There we go. And so if you look at it here, Ngannou landed 4 he successfully got 4 takedowns in the fight, which if you think about it, I guess it's like almost a takedown a round because it was a 5-round fight, right? So he was able to take him down. Gane actually got a takedown of himself. He got 1 in that fight. So personally, I think the wrestling in that fight was a little bit overblown. My theory on that was I don't think Gane expected Ngannou to wrestle him. I thought he would try and knock him out and stay standing. So I think Gane was kind of taken aback, but I'm sure Gane is going to be working on his wrestling in this fight. But it did ultimately make him lose the fight, but it was only 4 takedowns over a 5-round fight, which I guess is a lot because it's one takedown almost per round if you think about it, which is interesting. So I wanted to point that out. So again, Jon Jones, 44% takedown accuracy. Ciryl Gane in his career is, where are we here? Ciryl Gane has a takedown defense of 55%. So it's over 50%, which is good. I guess it could be better, but there we go. And he's only got 21% takedown accuracy. So we know he doesn't look for the takedown that much. Okay, let's look at the odds for this fight. So you can see here, a lot of books having Jon Jones as the favorite, and that's pretty much how I've seen this as well. But we'll see how things go sort of closer to fight time between these two. But yeah, you can see the average odds here have Jon Jones at -125, Ciryl Gane at +115. So who am I picking in this fight? Well, if you guys saw the reaction video I did to this fight, I was picking Ciryl Gane. That pick has not changed. I still think Ciryl Gane wins this, and here's why. There's a lot of reasons to like Gane in this fight. Number one, he's just a very smart fighter. He's very, I think, he saw the wrestling in the Ngannou fight. He's had enough time. I mean, that fight against Ngannou was over a year ago. You got to believe he's been working on his wrestling since then. I can't imagine him just like saying like, oh, we'll just forget about that fight. I'm not going to fight any wrestlers. There's a lot of wrestlers in the heavyweight division. Curtis Blades. There's lots that would want to utilize that. So I'm sure he's worked on that throughout his fights. I mentioned Gane being the exception to the rule. Like he's kind of an anomaly in a little bit of a way in that he doesn't have any sort of like crazy background in anything specific, but here he is walking into MMA and he's beating good opponents like Volkov, Rozenstruik, Lewis, Tuivasa, just the one loss in Ngannou, which again went to the scorecards. Like this guy, there's something special about him. Like I don't think you can just look at him and say, oh, Jones has so much more experience, that's why he's going to win. I don't know. Like I just feel with Gane, he's a guy that's, I guess, doing things at a faster pace than most fighters. So I kind of ignore that as well a little bit in terms of the experience. He's a little bit younger. The activity level, that's one thing I didn't talk about. Well, I did talk about it. Jones has had a huge layoff coming into this fight. I think that will impact him in this matchup. And if you look at the last time that Jon Jones fought in, what was it? It was February 2020. Ciryl Gane has had how many fights since then? He's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's had 6 fights since then. That's a lot of fights. So Gane is a lot more active. He's younger. Hasn't really taken any damage either. Jones hasn't either, but you look at like the first Gustafsson fight, you look at just how many fights he's had in general, like Jones has taken some damage. So that's another thing to sort of consider. But one of the biggest things that I don't think anyone's looking at is the fact that Jones is moving up. Yes, he's had time to bulk up and fit in the heavyweight frame. I think that's fine. But we also really haven't seen Jones get hit that much at light heavyweight. Like I know Gustafsson did. But one of the things I talked about when this fight was first announced was that, Jones never had to fight like and Anthony Rumble Johnson, rest in peace. He never had to fight like a really good power puncher. Glover was probably the closest power puncher that Jones fought, and it wasn't really an issue because Jones was just so much bigger. He was able to utilize that reach, and Glover wasn't really able to get on the inside. But now he's fighting a guy that has a similar reach. I mean, Jones has a little bit of a reach advantage here, similar height. Like he's not going to have a lot of the advantages that he had at light heavyweight as well, right? So that's one thing to consider. So again, new weight class. Can he take a punch at heavyweight? Gane's not a power puncher per se, but he has been able to finish fights. We saw him finish Derek Lewis, for example. So there's that as well, too. And then I think the other thing is that there's a school of thought, and I subscribe a little bit to it, that Jones has kind of been on the decline a bit. Those last two fights against Santos and Reyes, which, I mean, both of these fighters, Reyes is, I mean, there's a lot of things you can say about Reyes. He's taken a lot of damage over his last couple fights, especially, there's some questions of who should he still be fighting. Thiago Santos not in the UFC anymore and a bit of an older fighter, but like these wins haven't really aged very well in terms of the opponents. Especially since, like I said, people thought that Reyes won that fight. That has not exactly aged very well. And maybe there's a school of thought that he's on a decline. There's also a school of thought that Jones wasn't taking those fights seriously, so he wasn't trying. I mean, maybe that's the case. I don't know. But I just think there's a lot working against Jones here. Like I said, the layoff, the age, he's 35. Like you could argue that maybe he's past his prime at this point. We'll see. I don't know. We're going to find that out. Him going to a new division. Him fighting a guy in Gane is just very smart and very tough to take out. And Gane is like barely taking any damage at all. Tuivasa was the only guy, to my knowledge, I could be wrong about this, Tuivasa was the only guy that actually knocked Gane down. And a lot of fighters don't live to tell the tale of surviving a Tai Tuivasa fight. And Gane got hit and he still got back up. So I don't even think Jones is much of a threat on the feet. Like you look at Jones's last stoppage win, it was Cormier and it was a head kick, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, it was Gustafsson. But still, Gustafsson, again, not Ciryl Gane. I think Ciryl Gane's a much better guy. Anyways, I think I'm kind of spoiling it here, but I like Ciryl Gane in this fight. I think Ciryl Gane wins the decision here. That's what I'm going with. Again, I know I'm going against the grain. I know some people feel like Jones is going to go and out wrestle him and take him out. That very well could happen. Not naive to that whatsoever. But I just think that you've got a guy who's younger, more active, tough to take out, very smart fighter, good striker, doesn't take much damage. And again, Jones is coming in on a huge layoff, 3 years. Not everyone can be Dominic Cruz and come back and perform well. It just doesn't happen to everyone. Will it happen to Jones? Plus Jones switching camps, plus all the other stuff that's happened with Jones. I just think you got a guy in Ciryl Gane who, for the most part, wins his fights, and he's got no extra baggage. Jon has a ton of baggage here. He's got to win this. He's had this long layoff. He's moving up. This is it. I mean, this was his big fight, and he didn't even get the big name he wanted. He wanted Ngannou, who's fighting Ciryl Gane. So maybe he has the same sort of mentality that I'm not fighting like a huge name. So I don't know. We'll see. But I'm going Ciryl Gane by decision. That's the play. You're getting him at plus money. I think that's great. Because again, I don't think the wrestling is going to be as big of a factor in this fight as a lot of people are making it out to be. So there we go. All right, so I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below, as we usually do with the early look shows. If you guys want to debate with me, more than happy to do that. Insults, trolling, all that stuff, I got no time for that. Let's talk about this fight. It's very interesting. It's a lot of fun. I'm hoping to go cover this card live, still working out some details on that, but I would love to see this one in person. What an amazing matchup here between Gane and Jon Jones. So again, Ciryl Gane by decision is my pick. Before I get out of here, make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Lynch on Sports. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. You should be already. Hit that like button while you're there. The like button really helps out the algorithm, and hit that notification bell. Putting content up on this channel almost every day. If you could do that, that would be really awesome. All right, I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.